At InDigital, we know the public safety professionals hold themselves to a high standard. In fact, standard doesn't do it justice. In over 25 years working alongside you, carrying millions of calls over our IP networks, your dedication has inspired us. That's why our ESI Net goes beyond industry standards, not only I3 compliant, but designed to adapt to future development for a network you can count on when it matters most. Learn more at indigital.net.
Have you ever met a 911 professional and asked, what's the worst call you've ever taken? Well, here's your answer. I heard your last breath the night you flipped your four-wheeler. I tried to call you the day you committed suicide by driving your car into a tree. Blue face, cold to the touch. I helped you with CPR after you found your infant face down, not breathing. It messed me up. I did everything I could, but it wasn't enough. You were with me from the beginning, Grandma. 27 years later, I took the 911 call when you died. How fitting to be there for me in the beginning, and I was there for you in the end. I miss you, Grandma. I am 911. This is but a glimpse into the world of emergency dispatch. But what is it really like to answer a call during someone's nightmare? What is the impact on the first responder answering the call? From Titletown Publishing, and available on Amazon or where you purchase your favorite books and ebooks. Imagine listening. Your worst day is our everyday. If Within the Trenches has ever taught you something, open your eyes to what it is like to be a 911 dispatcher, or has inspired you to become one, then help support us and join our Patreon. Get exclusive bonus content, one-of-a-kind swag, discounts on merchandise, ad-free early access to new episodes, and much more. To join, please visit patreon.com/WTT podcast. And if you're an industry partner, we have something for you as well. And now, for the show.
This is Jordan, and you're listening to the Code 7 Podcast Network.
Warning. This episode contains the 3 A's of podcasting: adult content, adult language, and awesomeness. You've been warned.
Welcome to Within the Trenches, true stories from the 911 dispatchers who live them.
Hey, what's going on? This is Ricardo with the Code 7 Podcast Network, and this is Within the Trenches, true stories from the 911 dispatchers who live them. This episode is sponsored by InDigital, a leader in next-gen core services, and a big shout-out, as always, to patrons of the podcast, as well as subscribers on Facebook. We've got a lot of stuff going on, a lot of excellent content, a lot of just powerful stories. I'm going to be traveling a lot to conferences, teaching classes all over the United States. So watch out for that information. Plus, I'm wrapping up a lot of different things for book number 2 of Imagine Listening. Your Worst Day is Our Everyday, and I am all kinds of excited for that. There will be more stuff going on. Those who are listening right now, audio only, you won't be able to see this, but those who are watching on video, I've got my other microphone here set up for voiceover work for Imagine Listening Book 2. I had the honor and privilege of being able to voice the first book. It was awesome, and not a lot of people get a chance to do that, so it was really cool, and it took forever. But it was a great experience, and I love it, and I'm looking forward to doing number 2 as well. So look out for that, but you can go ahead and pre-order it now. It's already up for pre-order. That's book number 2, and you can get that on Amazon or wherever you purchase your books. So make sure to look out for all of that information, and there are several classes that I'm going to be doing throughout the rest of 2024, but just look out on social media. You'll find everything there. So let's jump right in. I've got my guest today. We were just talking, reminiscing, talking about a bunch of different things. I'm excited to have him on. And my guest today is Kris, and he is the Director of Program Development at The Healthy Dispatcher.
Ricardo!
What's up, man?
Man, it is so good to finally be here with you. It feels like this was a long time coming. I couldn't be more delighted to be here with you.
I feel the same way. It's been it's been a while. We've seen each other. Well, we were just talking. We were talking about APCO and Baltimore, and we had a moment there,
Yeah.
and we didn't officially meet actually until what? Just this past was it the past Nina in Texas?
Yeah, I think
Grapevine, I
that's
think.
actually right. I've stopped by, we visited for a bit, and,
Yeah.
yeah, man, I don't know how that is, but you know what it is? Every time you meet somebody in this field, and you know this better than anybody, Ricardo, I could meet somebody that's been a dispatcher for the first time, and I've known you for life. I mean, you've got that instant
Exactly.
connection, and I felt that way about you immediately, so.
For sure, man. Yeah, it's the same way with everyone. We've got that bond that goes through. We
Absolutely.
just understand each other, but also other folks that are on the private side of 911 and those who are listening to this who are on that private side. There's a saying there that the faces remain the same, only the shirt changes.
So true, man. It's so true.
It is
So
very
true.
true. Well, I am happy to have you here, dude, and I wanna jump in. I wanna learn a lot more about you. So, how did you get involved into public safety to begin with?
Well, I think my story is probably similar to so many stories. I mean, I
Mhm,
always talk about how who grows up saying I'm going to work at a 911 center. I mean, virtually no one. I think I've met one person
mhm.
in all the years that I've been around that actually thought about working in 911 beforehand. So I didn't. I was actually 3 years out of college. I was working in commercial radio right out of college, which my undergraduate degree was electronic media. I harbored these dreams, called them illusions. That'd probably be more accurate. Of radio stardom, man. I was going to go be a sports guy doing play by play. I'd be on ESPN in no time. Now let's actually look at the truth of the matter. I worked at a tiny little AM standalone station in a town called Aurora, Missouri.
Mhm.
That was KSWM on your dial, AM 940 on your dial. 10 watts of power at night. So perhaps if you live close to the tower and you had the gumption to do so, you could actually hear it. But for 3 years, I starved to death. I made no money.
Oh, no.
I had no benefits. And it was great fun the first year, like, oh, this is amazing. And then the second year, I was like, I would be, it'd be good to eat. And then the third
Right.
year, I was like, I gotta do something. So back in those days, this was 1994. And back in those days, you did this weird thing when you were looking for a job. You looked through a newspaper that you would hold and read. Indeed, indeed. I'm going back here. I'd come right out of the outhouse and then I'd pick up the newspaper. Sometimes we'd hitch up the horses and take them into town. That's how far back I go.
What's a newspaper?
Exactly. So I found a job that said emergency communications.
Mhm.
I remember it said $9.91 an hour. It showed where to apply. It was a city of Springfield, Missouri job. I remember my dad had said to me, "You ought to get a government job because there's great benefits and it's hard for them to fire you." So I applied based solely on that. I had a communications degree. I didn't even know it was 911, Ricardo. Honest to God, I applied, got hired. 1994, we were off site for training for 2 weeks. I swear this is true. I didn't know it was 911 until I was in the job for like 2 weeks, at which point they took us to the center for the first time, mind you, and said, "Yeah, you'll be answering 911 calls." And I remember thinking, "Oh, okay." So yeah, I fell into it in 1994. One good thing that came out of working in radio is I met my wife there. We're still married. It'll be 27 years this year. So not to
Nice.
suggest that my radio days weren't great because they were. I got a great wife out of the deal. But yeah, so I fell
Amazing.
in. Yeah, it's a pretty good deal. I fell into it. These were the days of pre-Annie Alley. There was no Annie Alley. There were no screens. There were push buttons when someone would call 911. And what was really cool is if somebody was irritating the shit out of you, not that that ever happened,
Right.
wink,
Yeah.
wink. You could press the button that they called in on and tie up their line for as long as you
What?
had the button pressed. So if somebody called in, they were harassing 911, you
Yeah.
just press the button that they called in on, which would tie up their line for just as long as you determined it needed to be tied up.
No shit.
Yeah, it was cool. So not that we did that often, but another memory of
Right.
those days, another great
Disclaimer.
memory. Yeah, exactly. Asterisk. Another great memory of those days, Ricardo, is they would try to count calls and to count calls and kind of keep track of stats back in the days before computers actually did it. They gave us these little clicker counters. And they said, okay, so every 911 call you take, you need to click that. A number will pop up. And at the end of the night, we'll come by and get a count from you. I was scared out of my mind the entire time I'm working. I didn't have time to click a clicker. I'm trying not to kill people. And so here would come the supervisor at the end of the shift, and we'd be like, "Oh shit!" And we just go click, 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 until he would come by and say, "Oh, you took 97 calls tonight." So yeah, some of the adventures of the no technology early days.
Oh my Lord. Okay, so let's backtrack a little bit. You that's a lot to take in.
The
Okay,
wild,
so
wild west, my man.
28 years though in dispatch, right? And
Yeah,
you're
correct.
going on almost 30 altogether in
Yeah,
public safety.
crazy.
You're in radio and such, not eating anything. I mean, not even ramen. Like
Dude, those days, I swear to God, I mean, I've probably embellished a bit over the years, but I made $7,000 a year my first year in radio with no benefits. I
wow.
think they generously bumped me up to like 9 grand a year by my last year. I had no benefits at all. I had no sick time. And I honestly could barely afford to eat. I lived in a shack in Aurora, Missouri. And by calling it a shack, I'm actually doing it some justice. It was I can't even, you should see the pictures.
It's like the roaches were eating better than me.
Dude, the toilet water would freeze in the winter.
Oh no.
My kitchen floor was like, I would slide down because it was at an angle. I had no money at all. But when you're young, that's the time to have no money and have
That's
adventure.
true.
Try and figure out how you're going to make half a loaf of bread into 6 meals. But yeah, I literally lost weight those first couple years after college because I could barely afford to eat. So
Holy crap.
yeah, it was nuts. It was absolutely nuts. But I was in radio, and I was living the life and driving my little Geo Metro all over the state of Missouri to do play-by-play on a bag phone.
Oh my God.
Yeah, truth. Whoops. So an upside down bag phone was literally my microphone for many of the play-by-play adventures that I had. And
No
I
way.
drive my own car. I remember I got a quote unquote $10 talent fee for each game that I did. So
Damn.
yeah.
But you met your wife out of it. So that was awesome, right?
Yeah,
So
she ran the board and did behind the scenes stuff. She was basically running the station, to be quite honest. But so I'd go out and do play by play at night, and she would be running the board back in the station. So I'd be like, "We'll be back to Aurora Hound Dog basketball after this 60-second timeout." And then my wife Mariah would play the commercials, and then we'd talk offline, and we got to know each other that way really, really well. We were both dating other people, so there's no expectation that we were going to date each other.
oh, there you
So
go.
we got to know
Okay.
each other on this really cool friendship level.
Mhm.
And then it just grew from there when we both got out of the relationships we were in. And like I said, 27 years married this October.
That's amazing. Well, congratulations there. That is
Thanks, man.
awesome. Now,
Thanks.
I have a question. Do you feel like, thinking back all those years later, or before rather, do you feel like your time in radio, the things that you were doing, did that any portion of that, any segment, do you feel like it kind of prepared you for 911?
That's a really interesting question. And I've had people ask me that before. I'll tell you how it helped me.
Mhm.
I was terrified taking 911 calls. I was, as so many people are, for the first good length of time, I was terrified I was going to kill somebody, as we all kind of did. But where I had no fear was being on the radio. Now, I was afraid being on the police radio because of the police. I didn't want to send somebody somewhere they weren't supposed to go. And back in those days, you had paper maps. Other than that, you had to know your geography.
Oh yeah, for
You
sure.
didn't have any CAD assist with that at all. So that was terrifying. But being on the radio and being nice and projecting my voice and all of that stuff, no fear with that at all. And I think you probably have seen this too, but a lot of people, when they get on the radio, even extroverts, tend to be like, "Hey, see." But when I
Yeah.
first got on the radio, I was like, 222, I have a call for, and they were like, "Back off, dude. You don't need to scream on the." So in that way, Ricardo, I think, yeah, I had no fear of the radio. I had no fear of kind of people listening to me or watching me talk. But the other stuff, I was just terrified, like so many people are.
Wow. Okay, so you're getting in there, and for basically 2 weeks, you're doing your training and not really sure that you're going to be taking, or knowing that you're going to be taking these 911 calls
No
and such.
idea. No
So
clue.
when you were doing those 2 weeks though, you said it was off-site, right?
Yeah.
So
Yes.
when you finally went into the center, for those who are watching and listening, what did you see? And also, how did you feel when you first walked in there and you saw everything that was there that you're going to be working with?
It was fascinating. It was a 2-story building. The upper floor was just like under construction. I remember there was just crap everywhere upstairs. So you didn't know but then you descended down into the dank, wet, always too warm basement. And it was weirdly lit. And back in those days, there was still a bit of smoking allowed, even in an enclosed space. It was, we were kind of getting into the point where that wasn't allowed anymore. But that kind of created a sort of a scum on the walls. And we walked in there, and there were all these people in light blue matching polyester with collar brass and all their little individual consoles. And I remember thinking, what in the hell have I gotten myself into? Like, I'm going to have to wear that and the headset and they were doing so many things at once. I remember being just overwhelmed as I looked over, say, for example, the fire dispatcher when I walked in, and he was writing things down while he was on the phone, while he was keying up on the radio, while he was talking to somebody across the room. And he seemed to be doing it all fairly calmly and well. And I remember just being completely blown away that humans were capable of that. And I remember thinking, as I thought for such a long time, as we all tend to, there's no way in hell I can do this.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was, and it felt very exclusive.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is a group of people that are really different than other, and they were, I had no idea how much so, that they're doing something that not very many people know about. And they're doing an incredible job with it. And listen to those phones. And I was just kind of in awe of it all, and terrified and interested and freaking out at the surroundings, and so much all at once. But it was a real eye opener. It really was.
You take me back to when I first walked into the central dispatch. I very first started out in a PD, small PD in Central Florida, one person on. But when I moved back home to Southwest Michigan, and I walked in for that first day of central dispatch, where there was 3 to 4 people on at a time, that was pretty crazy for me as well. I feel the same way as you, that feeling of just being overwhelmed, because what I saw them doing is, and this is the only way that I can explain it, it would be as if it was a human, like octopus. Like, that's how much they were moving their hands, like you would think they had all of these arms to do this. And there's just so much that's going on. I had the same feeling. Am I going to be able to do this? Like, I have experience already from the other place, but this is a different beast.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, and to this day, I never have lost sight of how special the people in our industry are and their ability to do that. And a lot of people are not. Let me back up here. The funny thing is, I think all of us in the interview pre-911, when we're asked about multitasking, we all think we're multitaskers. Like, I remember thinking to myself when they asked me that question, I've been on the phone and talked to somebody at the same time. I'm a hell of a multitasker. And then I got into 911, and I'm like, this is nuclear multitasking. So I've never lost sight, and people in 911 shouldn't either, of how unique a skill set it requires to not just multitask, but to multitask calmly and with excellence with every single thing that you're doing. It still blows my mind.
Right. Yeah. So here's the question then. The moment you realized that you were actually going to be, I mean, you said that they told you were going to be taking 911 calls, but when it became real, what was that like for you?
I was mortified, terrified. I was a cocky kid. I was, 26 when I started there, and not to impugn all young guys, but most guys in their 20s, we know they think they know more than they do. Hygiene is not particularly important. They're a little louder than they need to be, all of which was true about me. But I remember having that just chopped right down. Just this bravado, this mid-20s bravado that I came in there with, just got taken away from me. And in hindsight, that was one of the greatest gifts that I could have gotten, was to start growing up. And I desperately needed to. And as you know, Ricardo, when you work in 911, if you don't come into the industry with a little bit of modesty and humility, it will whip you into it against your will if it needs to. And I've always thought of 911 as sort of almost like basic training. It will tear you down to build you up in ways that you hadn't imagined. So I was terrified. And I remember my trainers saying, here's what's going to happen, and here's what you're going to need to do, and here's what you're going to have to find out. And just being absolutely overwhelmed continually telling my trainer, there's no way in hell I can do this. There's no way in hell I can do this. In fact, it's funny when I see some of my original trainers to this day, they're like, hey, Kris, long time. I told you could do it. So even to this day, because I became known for that. I was so terrified of screwing something up or killing. Who's ever worked in a job before 911 where if you did something wrong, you kill someone? Like I'm doing play-by-play on radio. If I call the wrong number, then the wrong kid gets credit for a basket or a touchdown. Who cares?
Right.
You have a little fun with that. You get into 911, you mess up a street location, somebody could die. So yeah, I was wide-eyed, awakened, sobered, and terrified.
It's definitely those moments when you get humbled when something happens, even if you aren't going in, all like, I've got this, all cocky and shit. There are moments where you get humbled, and in some of those moments you are glad, you're happy about later on. I remember when I was in the middle of training at the Central Dispatch, and it was a domestic call, and the old system that we had, the CAD system, and those for those of you who are watching that are from the general public that don't know what that is, it's computer aided dispatch. It's the computer software where we type everything in so that those on the radio can get the information, they can send it to the officer, and they get it on their laptops as well. Well, this old system that we had, you had to have everything, like the incident code, the ORIs, like all of this different stuff had to be perfect, or else that CAD call, it wouldn't go through.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, I could not remember the one for domestic. It wasn't just DV. It was
right.
It was DOME. For whatever reason, that's how they had it in there. Eventually they did change it to DV, but they had it as DOME. And in that moment where everything is going to hell and I'm on the phone, I couldn't get it to go in. And I covered my mouthpiece, and I looked over at my trainer and I said, I think you're going to have to jump in. And she goes, no, you've got this. Keep going. You can do this. And that's all I needed, was to hear that, because I started like kind of getting into my head a little bit, like maybe I don't got this. But she said that, and she didn't let me drown. She was right next to me, but she did throw me in the water, so that I could swim. And it's what I needed. And after that, it was like every domestic call, like those were my calls.
Yeah.
Like, I've asked people many times over the years that I've done this podcast, what is your favorite type of call? And for those who are also listening who are not in 911, that might sound crass or whatever, but that's not what I mean. It's just, there are certain types of calls that we take, that we just enjoy more. And what I mean by that is there's all of these resources. I feel like they're the ones that I was able to help the most.
Yeah.
Versus totally like someone calling in for like a fireworks complaint,
Yes, totally get that. Totally get that. Yeah.
So after that moment, those domestic calls, like that was my jam, man. Those were the ones that I really wanted to do a lot of. But it was because of that moment where I felt like, I don't think I got this. And my trainer goes, no, I'm not jumping in. You can do this. And it's what I needed.
Well, and that's the kind of trainee I was, Ricardo. I was, as long as I could lean into my trainers and let them help me, then I would do that. You bet I would have done that for a long time. But my good trainers would do exactly that. They'd be like, nope, you got this. You're going to have to, and you'd be terrified. You'd be like, but then you'd do it.
Right.
You do it. I mean, you didn't have a choice to do it. And you talk about call codes, by the way. Let me one up you even on that. In the first CAD system I worked in, and it was a CAD system in name only, here's how the call codes worked. So I sat down the first day and they said, okay, learning CAD is like learning a foreign language. You may have used a computer before, but you've never used CAD, and you've certainly never used our CAD. So in order to speak this language, first you have to understand the key words of the language. And they gave me this great big sheet with call types on it. They said, memorize these. Ricardo, the call types were randomly selected numbers. So a general disturbance was a 240. A domestic disturbance was a 242. An assault was a 110. I can't believe I remember any of these, but I do. I actually still have some of them committed to memory. So there were like 90 call types with randomly assigned numbers, and you had to memorize that. And you'd have to remember to put an I after it if it was in progress, a P after it if it was past. So yeah, there was it was 040, which was assault. I could go on, but so I was I was overwhelmed. I like how there's no way. In the meantime, everything you're doing is going 1,000 miles an hour when you're new, and you can't catch up. And if you can't get the call to go in, then everything starts to back up on you, and you're freaking out. So I had a trainer at one point that said, "Okay, okay, okay. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to highlight 12 of these. Can you memorize 12 of them?" And I said, "Yes, I think I can. I think I can do that." And that's what I did. So he picked like the 12 most common ones, had me focus on those, memorize those okay, and then we started to branch out from there. And you know what? I used that when I was a CTO. I used that same methodology for helping new folks learn various and sundry abbreviations or what have you. Just okay, let's just learn 5 or 6, and that really helped me. So yeah, it was if you went in there with clear speak to just type in the call types, it was overwhelming, as you remember, I'm sure. But then you throw a bunch of random numbers at me and tell me to memorize them, and it was overwhelming. It was ridiculous. It was just dumb.
Oh man, I think I'm breaking out in hives just listening to you. Holy shit.
It's almost 30 years later, dude, and to this day, I still will have a moment every other day where I think about a moment in my training and I get like goosebumps of that panic and that fear that I had during my training. Like it imprinted on me, and I'm so glad it did because it's informed who I have become.
Right.
But
yeah.
It imprinted on me in ways I never foresaw.
Well, and it's also good, especially for and that's why I love doing this so much, and why I think this podcast is so important as well, because there's a lot of people who tune in and listen who are newer or even seasoned. Some of them retired as well, but
Yeah.
a lot of those who are getting in or have been there for a while, they'll send in messages and say, I heard such and such on this one episode, and I had been trying to figure out how to conquer this piece or whatever. And I heard it there. And so like us talking about this is good stuff. And dude, I got goosebumps too when you were talking, because it took me back to some of those codes as well. We didn't have as many codes as you guys had, but we had about 25, 30 of them that we had to memorize. And it was pretty nuts. I remember I had flashcards and I would go through them with my wife. And I would, when I would get through, if I messed up on one, I would have her start all over.
Oh,
and
nice.
She would go, "You don't want to
Yes.
keep going?" I'm like, "Nope, I want to get all of these first until I get to the end, and then I can feel accomplished." And I think it was 11 or midnight one time that we were going over stuff, and it was super late, and I got them all. I was like, "Yes,
Nice.
let's go to sleep now."
That's amazing. And you'll always remember that.
Yeah.
And that is one of the joys of 911. I think a lot of the things that I love now, looking back, particularly when I was a new employee, that I couldn't enjoy then, or is that sort of thing. And looking back and seeing what that meant to me as far as who I was going to become, and how much of that I would carry in my heart going forward, and how much of that I would consider when training other people or talking to new people in our industry. It was such a great thing to go through in hindsight. And it sucked so bad to go through in real time. But as I look back, it's just invaluable stuff just like that.
Right, exactly. Now you end up going through, well, how long did the training last?
Training there was about a year, if memory serves, a year-ish. It may have been 14 months or so. And in Springfield, still to this day, you would train on each individual position, as you do in a lot of centers. First of all, you train on call taking. You'd become a 911 call taker. You'd do that for a bit, get your sea legs, and then you would move over to, say, the Springfield Police Radio or the Fire Radio or the Administrative Channel Radio or what have you, until you met certain benchmarks. And to be frank, in 1994, there were no benchmarks. There was no real training program. It was just like, yeah, you feel like you can do this, you're good to go.
Right.
But once you got all the different positions mastered, quote unquote, you were then considered cross-trained, and you could come in and which was then an 8-hour shift. You do 4 hours on police, 4 hours on phones, or what have you. So yeah, about 14 months, if memory serves, Ricardo. And God knows there were hiccups along the way. But once I started going, and once it dawned on me many months in, and it took a while, that, I think I can actually be good at this. Then, as you remember, I'm sure it lights a fire that really ignites you as you go forward.
Yeah, I've talked to a lot of people about how long how long it was into their career that they felt that they were really dialed in. And for me, I felt like it was 2.5 years,
Oh, totally.
maybe
Yeah,
3, but more so the sweet spot is 2.5 years where you
totally agree.
dialed in and just ready to go, man.
Yeah.
There's so much to it, but for you as well, looking back, do you remember your first call or some of those earlier calls that you were taking?
You know what? Here's why I remember my very first call, and I'll never forget it. We had a frequent flyer,
Mhm.
and I forget her name, but she was an elderly lady, and she was cantankerous, and I'm being kind. So she would call 911 and just lay into us with just really colorful verbiage. I mean, way beyond what someone her age should have been saying. In my opinion, talk to somebody that age, they're very kind and very gentle. Frankly, I'm that age now. But in any event, I digress. I took the call, and it was a non-emergency line, and I remember answering communications, Inman, and she said, "Enema?" And that's why I remember my first call. Yeah, she thought my name was Enema. And then she proceeded to absolutely tear me apart when I asked her questions. "How can I help you, ma'am?" "Oh, by God, tell you." And then she just laid into me with a string of F-bombs and worthlessness. And
Oh
I'll
my
never forget
lord.
that call. Yeah, everybody got a huge kick out of that call. So that's the very first call I took. Now, the very first call that registers with me, Ricardo,
Yeah.
is a call that I took. I'd been released for a few months. And I took, and I tell this story in classes that I teach. So if anybody's listening or watching and you've heard this story, just hang with me. Some of you have heard it a million times. Took a call. I forget the exact address. House fire. So at this point, I'm working with several other 20-something guys. We're all released. We're all competing with each other to see who can answer the most calls. And I get a call like, I don't know, 1328 East Elm, a church fire. And it's an involved fire because all the lines are ringing. And when you answer, people are doing this. "Oh, God, help us, God, God." And no coincidence, by the way, that they're screaming, "Oh, God."
Right. Yeah.
And the people are freaking out. You know how it is when a call is legit like that. And so
Exactly.
lines are lighting up at 1328 East Elm. I put it right in at 1328 West Elm, gets over to the fire dispatcher. Fire dispatcher dispatches it. Don't know if you caught what I did there, but it was at East Elm. I put it in at West Elm. Crew gets out on scene. There is no church. There is no fire. Lines are still ringing. People are losing their minds. And it dawned on me at that moment, as the fire dispatcher looked up over his console at me, that I had put an involved church fire in at the wrong address because I was being cocky. By the time the fire department got out to the correct address, the church had essentially burned to the ground because of my error.
Oh
And
man.
man, you talk about humbling me.
Oh,
You
for
would think
real.
I'd already been humbled, but wow, I will never forget that. I still have that copper penny taste of panic in my mouth when I talk about it. And it still informs everything I do to this day. But that call will never leave me. Now, fortunately, no one was hurt in the
Yeah.
in the fire, but literally a church burned down because of me.
And God's house, no less.
He and I have an agreement, we and an understanding. He has understand that was a training moment for me, so we're all good there. But yeah, man, it was horrifying. I will
It's
never, ever, ever. It's been almost 30 years ago. I just feel it like it was yesterday. Like how, and that also informed how the expectation of pure perfection that not only the industry places upon us, as you all well together well know, Ricardo,
Mhm.
but the perfection that we place on ourselves in 911, because we're kind of type A-ish, to say the least, in this industry. And so many of us come into the industry with these demands of perfection for ourselves. Certainly, as we work in it, we get more demanding of perfection from ourselves. And no one beats the shit out of us more than we do when we screw up. So
Yes.
yeah, and I'm still that way. Like if I screw something up, my wife is like, "Dude, it's going to be okay. You don't have to kill yourself." But I've got to be perfect all the time. And so that call really resonates with me for that reason. Plus, it still scares the hell out of me to think that I could have made a mistake of that magnitude. But I learned from it. I started a little training thing, and I started to volunteer with some CAD training to help people not make the mistake. And I learned early on, as you have to do in this industry, you're going to screw up. You hope you don't very often, and you hope that when you do, it's not that big a deal. But if you take 1,000 calls, you're going to screw up one or two. You just are. I mean, Ted Williams was the greatest hitter in the history of Major League Baseball. The dude hit 400, but he still failed 6 out of 10 times. I mean, even the greatest are going to make mistakes. So in 911, I learned early on, and I'm glad I did. And I hope people listening, especially if you're new, will take this to heart. Even though you are driven to run from your mistakes and panic and screaming and beat yourself up, figure out a way to own them and become someone who advances or evolves because you've made them. Because mistakes can give you that if you will let them. Doesn't mean you have to embrace them. So I learned how to be stronger, better, more improved through my mistakes. And it just changed everything for me. But man, I'll never forget that. Oh, I don't even like talking about it.
Oh, dude, I
Oh,
can goosebumps again because
oh,
I know exactly what you mean. And
oh,
those who are listening who don't come from this profession,
no.
it's hard almost to and you did very well doing it. What I was gonna say, it's hard to describe that
It is.
feeling
It is.
of fucking up
Yeah,
because
that's exactly what it is.
there's so much at stake.
Oh,
And as soon as you said what you said, it clicked in my head. I smiled a little bit when you said what you said because I caught it right away. And in my head, I was thinking it went to the wrong address. He
yep,
had the
you
east
did
and
know.
the west
Yeah.
thing in
Yeah, I
there.
can see it in your eyes. Yeah.
And it's those, but also it's that moment when you realize your whole heart just
Oh,
sinks, man. Or it's up in your throat, whichever. It's the worst feeling ever because you're right. There's that pressure because of what we do,
yeah.
because there's lives at stake,
Yes.
whether it be the caller or the people that are heading there, like everything, because people are screaming. Let's just say, they're screaming to an address where it's not happening. So if there was like an accident or something, then that's even worse. That's even
Oh,
more so because you're
Ricardo,
like,
why you
wait
got
a
to
minute.
add that to it and that
I'm
make it
sorry.
even worse?
I'm just
Oh,
I'm just saying, like, in this example, you brought up the example. I'm just
oh,
saying that in this example that if something like that happened,
yeah.
there's all of these other things that come
Yes.
and that puts even more pressure on us and it eats at us. And I
Oh,
was telling someone earlier that um there's no one else that's a more worst critic than ourselves. When I
no
was
one.
a supervisor and, I
Absolutely.
had to write somebody up and take them to the office to talk to them for whatever reason, I would always say to the person right away as we're talking about the incident, I would say to them, "Listen, there's nothing I can tell you that's gonna make you feel worse than you already feel.
Yeah.
So we're just gonna talk this through and we'll go from there because anything else that I'm say, it's gonna pile on, but
Yeah.
you are your own worst critic and it's eating at you. I can see it and it's gonna because I've been there.
Yeah.
I've done the same thing where
Yes.
there was one in the county that I worked in where there was one was called Allegan Dam Road, and then it was just Allegan Road, or maybe it was Dam Road, it was something like that. Either way, it was that close. I did the same thing, and it was on
Oh,
a medical, and someone caught it as they were heading that way, and I was just, oh my lord, like I can feel it right now that
oh,
I
I
will
feel it for you.
the
It's the worst.
anxiety, man, it was just bad, and I remember EMS called up afterwards, they're like, "Look, everything ended up being fine. I just need to tell you," and I was like, "Hey, I know I know exactly what it is," and they're like, "Alright, that was it." Like, they didn't even have to say anything else,
Yeah.
like, they could
Yes.
hear it in my voice, so I know exactly what you mean, man. Those are some heartbreaking moments sometimes, even if something bad doesn't happen. It's just heartbreaking to you because you wanna do such a good job, and when it happens, you're like, "I can only learn from this."
That's all. I mean, that's literally all you can do, Ricardo. If you're
Mhm.
willing to open yourself up and learn from the mistake, as painful as it is, it will make you stronger. It'll make you better. And you can even make the people around you better as a result of it. So that's what I really
Right.
tried to do. But another thing, you want your people to feel that way, after a call like that. I remember as a supervisor and as a trainer, I'd occasionally have a person who didn't sweat it when they made a terrible mistake. They're like, "Yeah, whatever." And that troubled me far more than
Right.
somebody beating themselves up troubled me.
Yeah, exactly, because someone like that who has kind of that attitude going into it where they're just kind of jaded or slightly crusty already,
Yeah,
then you start thinking, "Okay, we need to try to figure this out because if they really don't care in a spot where all we do is care, we wanna help people, we're
sure.
there with them the whole time, we're empaths. We put ourselves in their shoes so that we can understand and everything, and that's why a lot of that sticks with us, but if someone is just, like, really not caring, then you might need to
Yeah. It
being
could
in a
be.
different profession.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe this isn't for you. Yeah, for sure.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So you end up going through all of that and all of the stuff that you're learning, you end up becoming a CTO or certified training officer. Now, here's the question. Why did you become a CTO? And the reason I ask is because a lot of folks who have become a trainer as well, it's one of two things. One, they had shit training and they wanted to break the cycle and not have any of those new folks have to deal with what they dealt with. So they become a trainer, or they had amazing training and they want to continue that legacy by becoming a trainer themselves. What was yours?
I had both. I had one trainer who was an absolute terror. She was evil. I mean, she was pure evil. Like when she'd walk close to you, like you'd smell brimstone, the
Oh
smell of
my
hell.
God.
She was
Like, I see
I'm
your
not
broom.
I'm not positive about this because I never
Mhm.
saw her take her shoes off, but I think she was hooving. Not positive about that, but I'm pretty sure in any event, she was a terrible trainer and she was mean and vicious. And so I learned a lot about what not to do from her. And then I had a trainer who was this Zen, calm dude, and he was in the face of absolute chaos. He was so calm, and I was so impressed by that. So when my opportunity to train came along, I just felt like I had a really nice base of bad and good to work from. And so I wanted to help because I remember just the how overwhelmingly inept I felt trying to do that job.
Mhm.
And so I wanted to try and impact people who I knew were going to feel the same way. Because again, the great majority of us in 911 have never done anything like it before. Like some of the people I've worked with were, I worked with a chiropractor. I've worked with people that worked in drive-throughs. They don't have any experience with this. So it's a killer when you come into that. So I knew that I could make a difference for people who felt completely hopeless. And I knew that when they lost all of their confidence, which you will for a time in 911, most of us did, I knew that I could help fill that gap and keep them going and keep them pumped up and continually be there for them. So I was motivated to do that for people. And I think ultimately that's what powered me into being a CTO. And I was a CTO for several years and really enjoyed it, especially for people who were self-driven and self-motivated to be great and really beat themselves up when they weren't. And because you can work with that. And
Right.
so those were great people to help. And there's still nothing more rewarding to this day than to bump into somebody I haven't seen in many years. Hey, you trained me, Kris. It made such a difference in my life. And, because your trainers do, like all of us, when I talk to people around the country in 911, everybody's got a trainer or a person or people who they carry close to their heart because of the difference they made for them when they were new in their 911 center. Like I've got a couple people who I wouldn't be sitting here with you, Ricardo, if not for what they did for me in the early 90s. And so I was driven to be that for people, to try and help them see the greatness that they were capable of when they couldn't see it at all. And again, when you're a trainee, most of us, you are blind to any possibility that you could be great at this.
Right. And you are the type of trainer that I would have loved to have had as my trainer, because when I was working and I mean there was a point where a lot of places are short staffed, right?
Oh,
But
yeah.
the center that I was at, we were so short staffed that everyone became a trainer. We didn't go through the CTO program. Like, we had actual CTOs, but then we needed to train people so badly that everyone became a trainer.
Oh man.
And I took those moments to basically kind of share a piece of myself, and the stuff that I had gone through, and the wins, the losses, a lot of the devastating moments or whichever, because that's what I enjoyed with my trainers, was when they kind of gave a piece of themselves
Yes.
and really opened up and showed that they cared, and we're just like, oh, I'm not going to learn your name until you're come in here and you've actually earned it. No, fuck that. Like,
Yeah, I couldn't
I
agree
I
more.
want you to stay.
Hate that
So
shit.
you're
Hate that.
right. Like, I'm going to learn your name right away. I'm going to welcome you in and say hello and welcome to the family. If you end up not staying, then there was a reason, and that's okay. We continue doing what we do. And that's what I loved about a lot of those trainers. I had a trainer, his name was Rob, and I would observe him when he would take 911 calls for suicidal subjects. And what he would do is after he, went through the whole process and everything, he would start asking questions because for those who are watching and listening who have never taken a call before with a suicidal subject, you remain in the line with them as long as you can until help gets there. If they hang up, you call back, all of that stuff. But you have to continue that conversation and try to also keep their mind off of what they originally called for. So
Yeah.
what he would
Yeah.
do is he would ask them like, "What are your favorite movies? What kind of music do you like?" And all of that stuff. And I always loved that about him, that he would go to that human side. Because when I very first started dispatching, my very first trainer, all the way in the beginning, back in 2001, he told me that the things that I needed to do this job was to have thick skin, common sense, and to be human.
Mm, that's good
And
stuff, man.
that's always stuck with me, man.
That's good stuff. I mean, you've got the bases covered right there. And I always led every brand new trainee with the statement, "Hi, I'm Kris. I burned down a church." It was important for me to let them know that
Yeah.
they were looking up to me like I was some perfect version of, and I was far from it. And I let them know, hey, I made a terrible mistake,
Right.
but I'm better because of it. And so you're going to make mistakes. Hopefully, you won't burn a church down. But so I always tried to lead with my imperfections and let them
Yeah.
know, as confident as I was in the job now, that's not the way I started. And man, it's just that training period, having somebody that's really got your back, that really personifies the things that you want to be and that you want to see from yourself. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, definitely that human side. It's a big thing, and letting people know that um progress, not perfection,
Bingo.
because it's that perfectionism that really eats at you
Yep.
after a while. And
Yes.
it's better for people to know that it's okay to be human than
Yep.
to obsess over trying to be perfect, because that's when you start messing up.
That's
That's
exactly
what
right. When you start working to not fail, you're going to fail. It's like somebody told me, one of
Mhm.
my trainers years ago, "You ever seen one of those tightrope walkers?" And I said, "Yeah." You ever notice how they never look down? Okay. Well, if they look down, then they see that they could fall, and then they fall. And that really resonated with me. And by the way, every impression I do of everybody sounds exactly like that. So probably the person didn't sound anything like that. Just so you
Well, I dig it either way. So, you go through all of this time and everything. You've been taking calls and, you become a CTO. You've got all of this experience and such. And as long as you feel comfortable sharing, what about a call that sticks with you?
Yeah, man. I had gotten to the point I had become a supervisor, still taking calls, obviously, as so many supervisors do. I mean, so many people are supervisors and title only these days because they're out deployed on the floor. But I'd been a supervisor for a few years. And I was getting into that jaded point, like where you get to. We all get there when the job becomes second nature to you. You don't have to think about it anymore. When you leave work, if somebody says, "Hey, did you take an interesting call?" and you honestly can't remember any call that you took because it's so rote at this point. So I'd gotten to the point where I was kind of dehumanizing our callers a little bit, and I was theying them and othering them, and how dare they call and interrupt me trying to watch a ball game on TV. I'd gotten to that point, kind of a dangerous point. Well, to keep a long story shorter, when I was growing up, my mom was a single mom with me and two brothers. And
Mhm.
we didn't know at the time, she gave us this idyllic Andy Griffith-like childhood, but she really struggled. I mean, really struggled. Had some really bad things happen that I knew nothing about as a kid. So fast forward to this, me being kind of burned out, and I take a call one night and I'm kind of, edgy and I got the vocal tone, and it's this lady and she's suicidal. And she had three little boys, the same difference in age from my brothers and I. And she started to describe to me, as I was talking to her, a scenario eerily like the one I grew up in. I'm a single mom. My husband left me. I didn't have any work experience. I don't know how I'm going to pay the bills tomorrow. I don't know what I'm going to do for my kids. And she was all about her kids, her kids, her kids. But she didn't want them to see her being upset. And Ricardo, this struck such a resonant tone with me because of the exact scenario that I grew up with, that it just swept away the cynicism from me. And I connected with this lady in a real way that I hadn't since I was new. And it just sort of changed the trajectory of the rest of my career. Now, I'm not going to suggest to you that I was never an asshole in the future from that point. Cause sure I was, I'm human, but it changed the way I saw people, and it kept me from straying into that they are different than us. They're not as good as us. How dare they call 911 with an emergency that I don't think is an emergency? All of that bullshit.
Mhm.
But that call, I'll never forget it. And it's almost like the stuff of a movie. It was so similar to my childhood, and it just jarred me loose from this ridiculous state that I had fallen into and changed everything for me. I'll never forget that call.
Damn. So you just completely proved my belief that there are certain calls that are meant for us to take.
Totally agree with
And
that.
excuse me, I tell people all the time, especially when I'm teaching, that there are phone calls that are meant for us because we have a certain experience from our life that helps that specific caller
Yes.
versus our partner or one of our partners, whichever. Not to say that they wouldn't do a good job, they probably do great, but they don't have that experience that would cause a bond or connection that we would
Yeah.
have that's a little bit deeper with that caller than they would. And with you, what you just said right now, that is exactly that.
Dude, it was like it was meant to be. I don't want to get too mystical about it. It is what it is. But
Mhm.
I stayed on the line with her, and as you do, and we had a true connection. Like I really cared, and I got a sense again of what that caring felt like. Because you get 6, 7, 10 years into a job like ours, you start to disconnect in lots of different ways. And it's not even necessarily a conscious thing that you do. You
Mhm.
just do. And that reconnected me in very vital ways. And again, really informed my path forward from there.
Damn, that's amazing. It's the universe, man. It just happened.
Telling you, telling
That's
you
that was yours.
every time.
And so you go from there, we fast forward a little bit, and now we get to retirement time. And I want to ask how hard that was. And the reason I asked too is because when I finished up my dispatching career and I was given an opportunity to leave 911 to work on the private side of 911, um, it took me a little while to just say yes because I felt like I was betraying my family, my work family, my dispatch family. I felt like I was leaving them, but it took them explaining to me that one, I needed to choose me, I needed to choose, my family and such, but also that what I was doing would not only help them, but eventually one day help 911 as a whole. And then I finally left. But dude, it was a struggle. Like, it was hard for me to finally leave.
Yeah, I totally get that. I had gone on from being a supervisor to being the training manager for many years, and then at the end, for the last 3 years, I was our department's first ever internally promoted director. So I got a chance to be a director for 3 years. So I got a taste of a little bit of everything.
That's awesome.
But then as I hit my third year as a director, my wife and I kind of had a pre-plan, like in that third year, let's kind of take a look at where you are. Maybe it'll be time to go do something different. And, things conspired to create this incredible scenario that I find myself in. But speaking to that, Ricardo, I had these retirement parties and all these people, and they did all these amazing things, and all my incredible people at Springfield Greene County 911 who are family to me to this day, and I just desperately missed them. They did these incredible things, but I was sort of numb to all of it. Like
Mhm.
none of it registered at all, other than like, hey guys, I don't know what nobody be sad. Bye everybody. And then I went out to with Healthy Dispatcher. I had a job with Healthy Dispatcher like immediately, like the next day. I flew across the country to do some work with Healthy Dispatcher. And I was in my hotel room that first night, and just all of a sudden, like a sledgehammer blow, I was almost in tears. Like I was having trouble breathing. I was almost in tears. I was this devastating sense of loss just absolutely waylaid me. It was nuts. I had no anticipation of it. I didn't know what it was. Come to find out, it's a morning. It's you do a thing for almost 30 years and suddenly you're just doing something else. And I had not foreseen that I was going to need some time to cope with that. I didn't give myself any time. I jumped right in with the Healthy Dispatcher. Really glad I did. But man, Ricardo, it was hard. And that job that we were doing that week required me to interact with some other people. And a couple times I had to can you excuse me for a minute? And I had to go outside and gather myself because I was almost in tears just thinking about my people, because we were doing some stuff with other dispatchers and I just wanted to protect them. I wanted to be their director and I wanted to take care of them. And it was overwhelming. Having said all that, to have gotten the opportunity to do what I'm doing now is literally a dream come true, working with the Healthy Dispatcher and Adam Tim and this incredible company. And we'll talk a little more about that. But yeah, the retirement part was incredible. The parties and the goodbyes and all of that, but none of it registered with me emotionally until I was gone. And then it just almost knocked me down. And there were still times when I'm like, man, I miss my people. I love, love, love my people. I don't always miss the job. I'll be frank. I don't, but I miss my people. They're my family. They're so special to me. They always will be. So that's hard.
And this is why I wanted to ask you as well, because I have a few friends across the United States who have left. And recently I was chatting with them just over like text and stuff. And they said, what I didn't think was going to happen was everything was going to come back. Like a lot of calls that I hadn't thought about,
Yeah.
Something triggered something.
Yeah.
Or then I was thinking about, how I left and I was doing something else. And just like you feeling that loss, I was the same way. I started with the company that I was working for at the time in digital the next day. So my last day in dispatch was actually on my dad's birthday. And I had planned it that way. I told my dad, I was like, my last day is going to be on your birthday. And he's like, oh, that's cool. I was like, yeah, it is. It's cool. But I wasn't fully prepared for it because I had gone through all of those emotions and everything. And I thought, all right, here it is, next chapter. And the following day, it was my first day working within digital. I'll never forget. I called the VP of the company and I said, hey, Eric, I was just checking in. Just wanted to see what you guys wanted me to do today. It's my first day within digital. And he goes, this is what I want you to do. And it was like my dad was talking to me almost, and which is funny because Eric and I are about the same age. And he says, what I want you to do is I want you to take the next 2 weeks to just spend with your family. You've been working all these years in dispatch, and I want you to enjoy them because I'm going to tell you this right now. Once we start, it's going to be fast and we're just going to be working and working and working. So enjoy them now. And I said, okay. I said, but do I like, and he goes, don't worry, you're getting paid. He's like, you're
gotta have the important question answered.
Right. Yeah. He's like, you're going to get a check. Don't worry. We just want you to take this time because it's going to be nonstop in the private side. And I said, all right, cool. And it was that day and the next day, actually the next few days where I just had that sense of loss as well. And I remember sitting in front of my computer by myself, and it was crazy because I had pieces of paper laying out and all of my pens as if I was waiting for a phone call. And I thought, what am I doing? That's not what I'm doing anymore. And I just sat there and I didn't know what to do. But yeah, it was that sense of loss. The cool thing, though, in a sense, was that at the time, I still had my co-host who had started with me, and I would go back to dispatch and record in the quiet room, and then leave. So I still kind of had that connection there.
Sure, yeah.
But it was pretty hard, man.
Yeah, it's your family. I mean, and if you do a thing for a long period of time, especially a thing that requires you to go through the kinds of things that we go through in 911, there is a bonding to each other and to the work that occurs that is not necessarily that way in all professions. And you don't see it. You do it for a period of time. You don't necessarily even see it happening until it isn't happening anymore. And yeah, and Adam was great. After this job that I went out to help with right after my retirement, he said, "Hey man, why don't you take a little time and get your breath here, get your breath a little bit. This is a lot. I know I had you come out right away and get you right back in the action, but why don't you take a little time to breathe?" And I needed it. And again, there are still moments where I really miss my folks. But one of the neat things about what I do now is I feel like I can be for so many more people what I could only be for my folks in Springfield before. So that's helped me to really grow into this position and to be able to go out to 911 centers across the country and conferences, a lot like you do, Ricardo, and get to stand in front of groups of dispatchers and teach classes and talk to them about my experiences and about things that they can do for themselves. This has created for me this opportunity to be the thing that I miss the most. And now I can do it for even more people. And I get to do it under the auspices of the Healthy Dispatcher, which is an absolute, overwhelming honor among honors to get to do. So that's kind of the way I've come back around, and it's been quite fun, and it's only going to be more fun going forward.
That's awesome. So as we're kind of going into the wrap up of this episode, what I want to know is, and for those who are also watching and listening who might not know who the Healthy Dispatcher is, which I don't know how they would not, but if they don't, what is the Healthy Dispatcher? What does it all encompass, and what is your part in all of it?
Well, if most of you listening or watching surely know or have heard of Adam Tim. Adam is a superstar in our industry and has been for many years. And Adam founded the Healthy Dispatcher in the early 2000 teens and watched it grow enormously as he went around the country and taught and spoke and just made an immeasurable difference for the people in 911. Adam had been an LA dispatcher for about 10 years. And so he'd been through the trenches and he'd been through the whole disgruntled stuff and brought himself back out of it. And Adam, if you know him, is the most open and honest guy you'll meet. He's humble and he's raw and he tells you what he thinks. He's a dispatcher, essentially. So I knew very much about Adam and what he had done. And as I retired and Adam and I spoke, and I saw the opportunity was there to come to work with him, I just embraced it. And it's just such an honor. So what we do at the Healthy Dispatcher is try and share via our experience in a 911 center. Adam and I together have, over 50 years of experience combined. We do classes around the country. We can come out and speak to you on numerous topics, which you can find at thehealthydispatcher.com. Mm-hmm. We have leadership classes. We have classes about how to get back to basics in your skill set. We have all sorts of classes that we write proprietary to us based on the experience that we have had ourselves. And we come out and share that experience with you. We'll come out and do classes, 4-hour classes, 8-hour classes, 1 day, 2 day, 3 days, whatever it is you need. That's what we do. And it's just such a privilege to be able to take all these years of experience and to continue to use them in a way that helps the industry. And that's what drives our company at the Healthy Dispatcher, is being able to give back to an industry that's given us so much. My dad was a school administrator for like 30 plus years. When my dad retired, he got out of the industry. And I always thought that was so sad because my dad's so knowledgeable about it and so many young teachers could get so much from him. But my dad was one of those people who's like, I'm done with this shit. I'm not doing anything more with it. And I always thought that was kind of sad. So for me to have almost 30 years of dispatch experience, to be able to continue to use that experience in a way that can help other people with Adam, I mean, come on, it doesn't get any better than that. So I hope people will go to thehealthydispatcher.com, follow us on all of the socials. I do some really fun stuff for the company. I do a thing called the THD Training Minute, which comes out every week. It's just a little minute snippet training video that you can use, you can share with your folks. I write for the company as well. I've got an article that comes out every other Monday that we post across all of our socials. Adam is super active on there. Kaylee Green is another member of our staff who works out of North Carolina, does incredible stuff with our website and our social media presence. But we, as a company, are there to help dispatchers, period. End of story. That's what we do. And I'm just anxious to continue to get out across the country, as I've been doing feverishly since I retired, and meet people and talk to dispatchers. And as you and I talked about, Ricardo, when we met the first time, it's like we've always known each other because we're essentially family, as all dispatchers are. So when I get a chance to go out and be among family around the country, that's what this is about, man. It's what it's about.
Yeah, that's what makes it so much fun. And I think that's also what helped with that sense of loss in the beginning, because the company that I was working for, they found me through the podcast and they plucked me out because they knew that I had this tech background and everything as well. So when they plucked me out, they were telling me, we support everything that you're doing. Don't stop it. This is the reason we got you here, is because of what you do. And we want to continue to help you, push you and what you're doing with this show and sharing these stories and everything. So I think, like, for me as well, just kind of like you, jumping in and doing all these classes and all this other stuff and being around folks that are like family, that's what helped
Yes.
with that loss. Like it was a healing moment.
It fills that gap because you realize, and the thing I missed, as a director, trying to take care of my folks. It wasn't always as successful as I'd hoped to be, but I
Mhm.
always really, really tried so hard to make life better for my folks. And having that ability taken away was like ripping off a Band-Aid in weird ways. But now I've realized that I can continue that advocacy for the industry and for people at large. Like I was out in Oregon for 4 days at the beginning of the year, and I got a chance to not only teach multiple classes, but to just sit and visit with those folks and talk about what they need and share some of my experiences. And, that sort of thing fills the gap and makes you realize that the experience you have in this industry can continue to help you and other people. And, whether it's going to conferences, and we're at every conference, come see us at our vendor desk, like everybody come see Ricardo, then come see us, come get some swag. It's
There you
just
go.
nice to talk to people about what they're going through and how common it is for all of us.
Right.
And, one of the things we always talk about at the Healthy Dispatcher is somebody in another agency has a problem that you think is only yours, and they're solving it. So if you can get together, you can find a real resource in other people. At last Friday of every month, we do something called THD Talks, where we invite people to just jump aboard with us for about 30, 45 minutes and just talk about problems in your center. Talk to each other. We put people together because that's your greatest resource that you often don't even know is out there. People that are going through what you think is alone for you. So it's neat to put people together and help them solve issues that may seem like they just can't be solved. And it's a pretty cool feeling to get to do that.
That is awesome, man. It has been excellent to have you on here. It doesn't even feel like it's been an hour.
No, it feels like we just got started. Let's do
I
another
know.
3.
I know, right? This has been really good, but I have one last question for you.
Sure.
So with all of your years of experience now, I mean, you're going on about 30. So if you could go back in time with the knowledge that you have now to talk to yourself in the beginning when you very first started, what would you say to yourself? What advice would you give yourself?
Stop being so hard on yourself. Trust that you can do the things that you don't think you can. And just trust the process. Trust that the process will make you great. Let yourself go there because you'll get there. It's not going to be today. It's not going to be next month. Also, you're going to take a church fire call. Be really careful with that, please. But aside from all that, just chill, dude. Quit beating yourself to a pulp. Let things happen and let yourself become great, because you will if you'll just shut the hell up and leave yourself alone for half a second.
That's perfect, man. Awesome. Thank you so much for being on. It was a long time coming, and I'm glad we finally were able to do it, man. Thank you.
Ricardo, the pleasure is all mine. I'll see you at the next conference, my friend.
All righty. I'll be right back here with you in just one moment. And for those who are watching and listening, if you have any comments, questions, or you ever want to be a guest on the show, you can email us. And that's going to be wttpodcast@gmail.com. Once again, that is wttpodcast@gmail.com. You can follow us all over social media. You can become a supporter of the podcast. The easiest way to do this is to simply go to links.co/WTT podcast. And that's links with 2 i's.co/WTT podcast. That goes to my bio site. It has everything on there, my email, all the social media, where you can listen to the latest episode, where you can schedule an episode as well. So if you are new to the profession, if you are seasoned, or if you are retired, shoot me a message or go there, schedule an episode. I would love to have you on the podcast to share your story. I've been doing this for over a decade, and this is what I love to do, is getting these important, powerful stories out there for people to learn about what it is that you do, but also for others to not feel alone, but also for the public to know what it is that you do, but more importantly, why you do it. So make sure to go there, schedule an episode. Again, I would love to have you on. There's more stuff on there as well where you can purchase Imagine Listening. You can pre-order book number 2, or you can go on there for to be a supporter. And there's also podcast merchant as well. Podcast/dispatch merchandise is there. This broadcast has been sponsored by In Digital, a leader next gen core services, and this can be seen on Facebook, YouTube, as well as X and LinkedIn Live, sometimes on Instagram as well. And then for the audio portion of that, or all the episodes, over 500 hours worth of powerful 911 dispatch stories, you can listen 24/7 on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, your favorite podcasting app, and within the trenches.net. Have a good one, everyone, and we will see you all in the next one.